I never suspected that when I played Little League Baseball as a kid, that experience would be useful for me several years later when I accidentally stopped a murder trial as a college student. When I was a kid, my dad took me to my first Little League Baseball practice, and we didn't even know who our coach was going to be. So we're waiting there along the first base line, and the parking lot was out beyond the outfield. And all of a sudden, this red Mercedes pulled up, and we watched this guy get out of this car. He's huge, and it was really funny. So it was starting linebacker for the Buffalo Bills, Isaiah Robertson, was our coach. And so he walked across the baseball field, and I still couldn't believe it was him. So he had this way of teaching us. He taught us a couple of things. First thing was always keep your head in the game, and that's the way he coached us, because he really would put anybody in the game at any time. He really didn't care, even if your dad was one of the assistant coaches, everybody was going to be on board. So he taught us to always keep our head in the game and be ready to go, watching the pitcher, watching the trends of how people are playing on the opposing team, and always be ready to get that tap on the shoulder and stand up and be in the game. And it was funny how that came around when I was invited to observe a criminal trial. I'd been invited by my in-laws to work in their law library. The books were a mess. They need a lot of help getting things organized. So I did that, and relatively quick. It wasn't a hard job, obviously. And so after just a few months, I had pretty much put myself out of a job. I saved the firm about $60,000 in unused law book subscriptions. And so I was down to working about 2 hours every 2 weeks. So the office manager was so kind to me. She said, "Hey, Bob, we've got an idea for you. If you're open to it, you're welcome to go and observe a criminal trial." They were a plaintiff's law attorney, so they represented someone who was involved with the defendant in the criminal trial, and they were going to represent this person in the subsequent civil trial. So the office manager said, if you're open to it, this might be a once in a lifetime learning experience for you. You can sit in the courtroom among the attorneys and you can observe this trial, and we'll pay you for doing that since you've done such a good job in the library. So I accepted the offer, and I had the expectation that there was going to be an attorney in the firm, Tim, who was supposed to be there every day in case something did come up, because there was a relationship between our firm and this criminal trial. And he was there most days, but I wasn't prepared for the meeting if there was something that was going to happen where our firm was involved and he wasn't there. And sure enough, it happened. And during that first week, it was a Friday afternoon. We came back after the lunch recess, and everybody reconvened in the courtroom. And so the judge brought the court back into session, and then immediately the lead prosecutor stood up. And he said to the judge, "Your Honor, I would like the file we discussed earlier to be submitted for review. I think it might be relevant to this case." And so the judge agreed. He said, "I agree with you." And then he looked out into our direction in the audience, and he said, "Does anyone represent the law firm of Mizrandino, Kroll, and Foley?" I said, "Oh, that's our firm." So I thought, oh boy. So I just kind of immediately reflected back to Coach Robertson. I thought, well, I've got to step up. This is my chance. I'm in the game. So I stood up and I said, "I represent the firm, Your Honor." And then I froze and I realized I have no idea what to say. I'm not prepared for this conversation. So I just stopped talking. And then one of the other people on the prosecutor's team whispered to me, "Tell him your name." So I said, "Well, my name is Bob Green." And then I added, just to give a little more detail, "I'm not actually an attorney at the law firm." The judge paused for a few seconds, and then he said to me, "What do you do there, empty ashtrays?" And so at that point, I realized I probably should stop talking again. I'm probably not doing any good here. So I just froze for a few seconds more, and the judge paused for a few seconds, and then he said to me, "Okay, I want you to go back to your office and get that file and bring it back to me. And I mean run, don't walk." And then he pointed to the door and said, "Go." So I turned and I pushed the gate open and I walked past the other chairs where people were observing in the gallery there. And as I walked to the door to leave the courtroom, the door opened outward. I reached for the door with my right hand, and as I did, a deputy who'd been standing by the door whenever the court was in session grabbed the doorknob before I could, and I saw him retract his arm to hold the door closed. So while he grabbed with his right hand, I kind of pulled my arms back, and I stopped right in front of him. So he stood kind of behind me with his right hand on the door. He put his left arm around me and he said, "Thanks a lot. We needed that. It's been a little tense around here." I thought, okay. So everybody is laughing just in case I wasn't sure about that. Um, but it was almost like he was saying, "Hang in there, buddy. You know, you're going to get through this. We'll see you back here soon." So then he let go of the door and I pushed the door open. And there were three reporters from CBS, one NBC, another ABC, all laughing as they were watching me from a camera that was in the courtroom that day. They burst out laughing, especially when I was stepping through the door into the corridor there. So I turned the other way. I had to go back that way anyway to go to the office. So I went back to the office looking for Tim, never did find him. I found his dad, Paul, and I said, they sent me to get the file. So he immediately knew what to do, went to the drawer, grabbed the file. He kind of tucked it under his arm like a football, and he and I marched back to the courtroom. It was about 45 minutes, though, so by the time we got back into the courtroom, all of the participants in the court, from the judge, court reporter, attorneys, defendant, even the jury, were all somewhere else. So I think Paul could sense my disgust when we walked in. I just kind of dropped my head and I thought, oh man. So Paul just said to me, "Don't worry about it. I'll take it from here. Have a seat." So I just took that same seat where I embarrassed myself and maybe my whole family's name about an hour earlier. And they were discussing this file privately. So after about a half an hour, I realized there's nothing more I can do in damage or good here. So I just left for the day. And I came back Monday morning, and nobody in the firm had said anything about what I had done or what happened. We never really did debrief that situation. And as I said, I wasn't really prepared for it, just in case it would have happened as it did. So I'm sitting there in the courtroom in that same chair on Monday morning, and about 25 minutes before the court was back in session again. And I was just sitting there reflecting on, the disaster that happened on Friday, and sort of, hey, Monday's a new day. Let's see what happens today. Maybe I'll just observe and just be quiet like I had intended. And as I sat there for a few minutes quietly, all of a sudden, one of those reporters who was laughing at me on Friday, Mary McCombs from ABC7 Buffalo, came in and sat down next to me. And she said, "Good morning." And I responded, "Good morning" to her. And then she looked at me with a smile and she said, "We didn't think we'd see you back here again." And I thought about it for a couple of seconds. And I said, well, like any good Buffalo sports fan, I'm going to stay until the end. So she acknowledged what I said, and then she stood up and walked away to do the work she had to do that day. And as I thought about what she just did, I thought, this is the first time in this more than a week here now that I've actually felt like I belonged in this courtroom. I really am not an officer. I'm just an observer. And after Friday, I felt like not only a fish out of water, but maybe even a fish in a fry pan. And she was the one person who said, "You know what, buddy, we see you back here after obviously the disaster that happened on Friday, the courage to show up and at least not run away and hide." So that was kind of a cool thing. And I just thought about that in terms of, some meetings that I've recently had and how important it is to help people to prepare as best you can for some uncertainty, even if I'm not the right person, but here's what to do next. And then that part at the end that we often forget about, you can't really be revered when you get through a struggle like that unless somebody stops again for one more meeting to acknowledge what happened. And maybe it's just that you got through it and you showed up again. You didn't run away and hide, or, take one of those personal days off to let all the calls go to voicemail. And so, just one of those reflections that it struck me about how we kind of forget about that. So whether you're the person to help somebody prepare for the meeting in advance by giving them a little insight about what to do, even if they're not the hero in the adventure as Paul was, and because he should have been, he earned it. But how to be that facilitator for the hero, or maybe the ally in that case of the adventure. And remember, in the adventure, you always want to make sure you acknowledge that celebration, even if it's the being revered for just not screwing it up anymore and helping to achieve the outcome that was intended. So be the person to help in the end when you want to pull it together and the lessons learned and showing up and showing the courage, or be that person in the beginning to at least be ready to get that tap on the shoulder and know what to do and get in the game. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.